In this video, we are going to talk about forecasting. We are going to talk about what forecasting is, what are the types of forecasting, and what are the laws of forecasting. We will start with definition of forecasting. It's an estimate of the future level of some variables. It's usually the demand that we want to forecast, but it can also be something else. It can be forecasting the supply, forecasting the price, or other things. So, why do we need to do forecasting? It determines long-term capacity needs. It's required for annual business planning. It's necessary for short-term operations in supply chain management activities. So, just as an example, assume that provincial government wants to build a hospital. How can they determine what size of a hospital they should build? How can they determine how many doctors they need for the hospital, or how many nurses they need for the hospital, or even how many supplies they need for the hospital? For all of them, they need to do forecasting of the demand. Organizations use different types of forecasting. Three of the most common types are demand forecasting, supply forecasting, and price forecasting. So let's see what's demand forecasting. It's important to distinguish between market demand and firm level, company level demand. So let's say if there is a forecast that the number of the demand for hybrid vehicles by next year will reach 8 million. So what does that mean for an automobile manufacturer? In order for them to plan for their business activities, they have to decide and identify how much of this 8 million will be their own market share. How much of that part can be filled by them. They need to estimate that, they need to forecast that. And it's not just that. If they sell hybrid vehicle, they have to provide warranty repair for those automobiles. They have to also account for spare parts that they need. So using all of them, they should do a demand forecast, and based on that firm level demand forecast, they can plan for their business activity. So that was the demand forecast. Now let's talk about supply forecast, which can be absolutely as important as the demand forecast for businesses. So let's say there is political turmoil in an area that supplies one of the key ingredients of your raw material for your factory. You have to closely monitor and forecast that flow of supply to your business. Other than that, you will have disruption. The next type of forecasting is price forecasting. And why do we need to talk about price forecasting? It's very important. Businesses use price forecasting to come up with their purchasing strategy. And to do that, they need to identify, forecast whether they think the prices are going up or going down. And what does the difference does it make for them? The difference is that if they think the price is going up, they can purchase in advance. They can either do it contractually or actually physically go ahead and purchase and keep those key material in inventory, or they can sign a contract that they have purchased the material and they receive it in the future and they pay for it, but they have fixed the price. However, if they forecast that the prices are going to fall, then their strategy would be for the time being to purchase in a smaller quantities with the expectations that prices are going to go down. And when prices go down, they can purchase more. So that's how forecasting price impact their purchasing strategy. Now that we've found out what's the definition of forecasting and what are the types of forecasting, let's talk about basic laws of forecasting. The reason we have laws of forecasting is because it helps us to apply forecasting in a proper way and to interpret forecasting in a proper way. So the first law of forecasting is that forecasts are almost always wrong. What does that mean? It means that whatever you do to forecast demand, supply, or price as accurately as possible, at the end of the day, it's an estimate. And it's not going to materialize exactly the same way that you forecasted them. So you use forecasting when there aren't better options available, but you have to keep it in mind that it's not going to happen exactly as accurate as you would like. It's an estimate. The second law and third law help you to make your forecasts more accurate, and let's see how they do that. So, second law of forecasting identifies that near-term forecasts are more accurate. Why is that? It's because the variables that impact forecasting are less prone to change. Let's use price of gas as an example. If we think about price of gas, in a short term, we know what are the dynamics. For example, we know if it was 2015, we knew that we had a crash on price of oil, and we knew that for short term, price of gas would stay low. So we can have a line of sight. But if in 2015, you wanted to forecast what the price of gas would be in 2018, it would have been harder because you didn't know within 3 years what the dynamics would be, what the oil price would be. So you could have forecasted much more accurately for the next month compared to the next year. So I think it's self-explanatory, and you will get that. And the third law, which again helps us to improve our forecasting, is the fact that forecasting for groups of products and services is more accurate to drilling down to individual items. And why is that? Let's use the cars as an example. If you want to forecast what's going to be the demand for silver cars next year compared to white cars next year, it would have been harder compared to forecasting the demand for overall cars next year. So if you add the color of the car to your forecast to make it more specific, that makes it more difficult, because then you're bringing an extra variable, which is the fashion. What might be fashionable next year? Is white going to be more fashionable or silver going to be more fashionable? But if you forecast the demand for cars, you are eliminating that color fashion variable. So that's the logic behind why forecasting for groups of products is more accurate compared to specific items. The last law is forecasts are no substitute for calculated values. So forecasts are not substitute for calculated value. And what does that mean? It means that whenever you have the opportunity to actually take advantage of accurate and calculated numbers, then why not? If it's impossible to have those calculated numbers, then you don't have any option. You have to forecast that. An example is a factory. Let's talk about this example that the textbook has used about a plant that produces rubber products. Every Wednesday, the operations team identifies how many of each product they want to produce next week. So that provides an opportunity to accurately calculate how much rubber they need every week. And purchasing department can use those numbers to go and purchase rubber for next week. However, their purchasing department has used forecasting for their procurement. As a result, every week they either have too much rubber or too little rubber, because it's a forecast, it's not accurate. And because the purchasing department did have the opportunity to actually take advantage of calculated values, it doesn't make sense to use forecasting. So the fourth law identifies that only use forecasting when you have to. So we learn basically what are the proper applications of forecasting using these four laws.